Last minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning ride is okay.
And staying in front of the day isn't always as
Nice
simple
ride.
as 1,
What's
2,
up?
3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
What's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
You're listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast with Derek Brown on the NASM Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Mindful Drinking Podcast, where we talk about tools and information that you can use to drink more mindfully. I'm your host, Derek Brown, and today we're going to explore the world of adult non-alcoholic beverages and if they're any good. That's another question, I think a big question that people have. Of course, if you have been paying attention to anything during dry January, you've probably seen just a plethora of information out there about non-alcoholic beverages, whether it's non-alcoholic beer, non-alcoholic wine, non-alcoholic ready-to-drink cocktails, non-alcoholic cocktails. And all of this has been steadily out there for the last month. I've seen so much of it. I've been on news segments myself talking about it. And it seems to be a topic that people are very interested in. A friend of mine named Camille Vidal, last year, we talked on a panel at Tales of the Cocktail, and she said something that struck me that I wanted to share. She said that bartenders and sort of beverage makers of the past who are doing adult non-alcoholic beverages owe the public an apology. And the reason why is because very often the drinks that we made were flavorless, overly sweet, malty, and just generally not on par with alcoholic beverages in any way, shape, or form. They were bad. I think that's the short answer. They were not very good. And so on behalf of those people, I'm happy to apologize, but I'm also happy to say that has greatly changed and that there are so many adult non-alcoholic beverages out there that there's an entire association dedicated to them. And so that's what we're going to explore today with the help of my guest, Marcos Salazar, who is the CEO of the Adult Non-Alcoholic Beverage Association. Now, Marcos does a lot more than that. He's also a serial entrepreneur, a certified business coach, and he's got a master's in organizational management. He's a friend of mine and just a tremendous voice in the no and low alcohol industry. So I'd love to bring him on today and introduce you to Marcos Salazar. Welcome to the show, Marcos. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Derek. Good to see you.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to jump right in because I realize in all of our discussions, or maybe because my memory can be kind of bad, I don't really remember exactly how you got to the point where you changed your relationship with alcohol, or you realized that there was a necessity for others to do as well. Because I don't know the exact origin story, I guess is what we call it. So I was going to ask you right up front, what is your origin story with all of this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I love asking people those questions as well, especially our members of the Adult Non-Alcoholic Beverage Association, how they eventually got started in this really dynamic and growing industry.
Yep.
So about 2018, I just started realizing that alcohol wasn't really serving me in the way that I thought it had previously. And was probably drinking much more than I should. I was living in Brooklyn at the time. There was this great dive bar that I used to go to after work to do some more work as an entrepreneur. You're kind of working all the time in New York City.
Yeah.
And I would have a drink out and watch the sunset over Brooklyn. And then one drink turned into 2 and 3 and so on. And then I just realized it was just having such a negative impact on my sleep and my energy. So I started rethinking and reevaluating my relationship with alcohol in conversation with my amazing partner who I'm married to today. And just realized that I still want to drink, but I did not necessarily want to drink alcohol. I'm the type of person that when you're at a party, I raid the fridge, I raid the cabinets because I love making cocktails for people and all kinds of different concoctions. And I love serving
Guilty.
and creating community and connection as that, similar to you. So I started just looking to see what was out there around 2019 and 20. And I started to see this emerging adult non-alcoholic beverage category.
Mhm.
Athletic had just popped up, a lot of non-alcoholic beers. And then there was Liars and Ritual and a few other things, a few non-alcoholic spirits that were emerging. So I just literally bought all of them. And I just really
Awesome.
started enjoying all the different flavors and flavor profiles and ways in which I could make different types of drinks. Fast forward a little bit, and I saw that there was no one that was creating event experiences that were connecting these non-alcoholic brands with these consumers that were interested in it. At the time, I was doing events in the social impact space and doing something similar where we were creating huge panels and networking events and connecting conscious consumers with socially conscious brands. So thought we could do this for the adult non-alcoholic beverage space. Opened up a company called For All Drinks. We're going to do pop-up speakeasies, dance parties, karaoke. I had this awesome space in New York City, was about to launch, then COVID hit.
Oh
So
boy.
transitioned to an online company, launched the first podcast on non-alcoholic beverages called For All Drinks, did tons of virtual events. And as I was doing this with all these emerging brands, I started to see that there were a lot more challenges than just simply connecting with consumers. There were regulatory challenges. There was engaging with retailers. There was just so many entrepreneurial business challenges. And that's when I realized there was an opportunity to create a trade association really to help accelerate the growth of this non-alcoholic industry. And that's really where the trade association, the beginnings of the trade association emerged.
Awesome. All right, let's put a pin in that because we're going to get to ANBA, the Adult Non-Alcoholic Beverage Association. But I want to go a little bit back into your origin story,
Yeah.
because one of the things I've really always been impressed with you about, and I'm going to share with people out there, is that you have this deep knowledge of organizational management and business, and that's sort of part of the lens that you look through. Now, we always talk about how to make delicious drinks. We talk about some of the health aspects, but we rarely get into that business aspect of it, which I think is really cool. And it's something that you have done. I know that branding is also something that you've dealt a lot with. In fact, you had a TED talk that I think I saw 600,000 views.
It's at
Am I-
1.7 million right now.
Geez, woof. All right, you went
Yeah,
viral, buddy. So
I
like,
know.
tell me about that talk and tell me a little bit about this area of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I've been an entrepreneur pretty much since a kid, always doing some types of business. And then after I graduated college, I kind of had this double life.
Wait, what was your first business as a kid?
I mean,
Just
you know,
curious.
yeah,
Lemonade stand?
no, second grade. This is pretty hilarious. It's probably the first time I've ever said this publicly. In second grade, and not the most lawful abiding business,
Okay.
but I would go and I'd actually steal calculators from purses, those small purse calculators from J.C. Penney's, and then sell them in school to other kids. So
Wow.
I got caught because everybody started getting hundreds on their second grade math tests. So I ended up going and returning all of the calculators it was J.C. Penney's that I was doing this with.
That's
But
awesome.
I think as an entrepreneur, you're always trying to problem solve. You're always trying to think about what are the things that I can solve for a business or for people to just make their lives better. So I've always just been an entrepreneur. But I think as part of that entrepreneurship piece, you have to be able to sell your ideas. You have to sell
That's right.
your ideas to potential investors, but also customers. And that's where branding comes into play. The TED talk I gave was how to build a strong personal brand in a way that feels good. Sometimes people think about branding and marketing as icky, but the reality is that you are selling an idea, and that idea is hopefully making someone's life better. So that's
Right.
why you can feel good about sales and stuff. It's like the end goal isn't just to try to make a quick buck, it's to try to improve people's lives.
Right. And that's the thing, is that you don't just, approach it from an entrepreneurial and social perspective. I mean, entrepreneurial and business perspective. You add that social element into it as well, which I think is so cool. I mean, that is what I like to think about, and I think is a way that we can really generally improve people's lives is by merging business and nonprofits and the social aspects of it. So tell me a little bit about the social aspects of it and how you got involved with that.
Well, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, and so there's like social entrepreneurs and there are entrepreneurs, but I think at the end of the day, they're doing the same thing, which they
Yep.
are serving people. Right.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and I think if you can really enjoy and fall in love with serving people and making their lives better, the money will come. But
Yeah.
the foundational piece is how do you end up serving people? My first job was a busboy, and then I was a host, and I loved being able to serve people, to be able to create really great, memorable experiences and joyful experiences. And that was really fulfilling to me. And then I eventually have always been kind of nonprofit, social justice oriented. So
Yep.
when you're thinking about that service, then you can think about how do you apply those entrepreneurial principles to a particular social problem. And
Right.
that could be something like poverty. It could be malaria. It could be something like that. But I think about it in a much more expansive way. In the company that I still own, but my partner runs, Be Social Change, the events that we used to do is we used to do a lot of networking events. And we've talked about this in terms of social wellness,
Right.
is that when you end up kind of creating these spaces where people feel open and safe and really comfortable to connect, that's where a lot of this magic happens. I used to call it how do you create event experiences that accelerate serendipity and
Yep.
help people that normally don't get to bump shoulders collide. And that's where you share ideas, you form partnerships, and then you build lifelong relationships. And then kind of circling it back, we used to do that in the social impact space to help people find jobs, get connected, form partnerships in this kind of non-alcoholic beverage space. That social wellness piece is integral and that connection piece is integral because we use food and drink to facilitate connection. And we've been doing that for hundreds of thousands of years as human beings. And that's what I think is so fun about this non-alcoholic beverage space is that now that there's really great options, it's much easier for everybody to be involved in those experiences where people have an opportunity to connect.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I want to just fill the listeners in on this is that we work together on Mindful Drinking Fest. ANBA, or the Adult Non-Alcoholic Beverage Association, is a strategic partner. So that's how we know each other in part, but that's also something that we do together. And I'm really grateful for all your support there. And what you're saying is absolutely true, is, food and drink are how we connect. And there's a way that we can do this to create lifelong relationships and to improve the world, as it were. And I think that, ANBA is doing that. So tell me a little bit about ANBA and the mission.
Yeah. So at our core, our mission is really to protect, promote, and grow the adult non-alcoholic beverage industry. So we're a nonprofit trade association, and the purpose of that is really to help businesses that are in that particular category, in this case, non-alcoholic beverages, grow by
Yep.
providing them resources, networking, and really advocating on their behalf. So that at the core of what we're trying to do, with the end goal of ensuring that everybody, and every time people sip, they end up connecting and celebrating. They have a great tasting adult beverage, whether that's non alcoholic or alcoholic. So people feel included in those social situations. A lot of times, and this is where kind of my organizational management and business coaching comes into play. Like we have over 100 members that are producing non alcoholic beverages, a
Yep.
lot of them early stage founders. So I have an opportunity to really coach and really support these founders in growing their businesses
Yep.
from a strategic standpoint, from a leadership standpoint. So I partially serve as like 25% coach, 25% like partnerships, advocacy, and then also just building out the resources that brands need in order to grow their businesses. And the best way to think about it, and in terms of an analogy, is if you think about the plant-based movement that was
Yeah.
vegetarian and then vegan and now plant-based.
And it's
And the
huge.
and the decades that it took to get to the point of where it is now, where it's on menus in every restaurant. There are particular dedicated aisles. Or it's integrated with milk and plant-based milk next to dairy. we want to do the same thing for adult non-alcoholic beverages, but instead of it taking decades, we want to shortcut that process. So it's only taking, say, 3 to 5 years and really accelerating the growth of the category.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's obvious, that it's working. Like I said in the beginning of the show, we see this growth. And how many brands did you say ANBA represents?
We have over 100 producer brands, and then we have over 30 industry members. So those are the members that are either suppliers, legal, ingredient suppliers, distributors that are helping to support the growth of the individual producer brands. And we're global in scope. We are based in the US, but we have many, many global members as well.
Great. You're listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Brown, and we are talking to Marcos Salazar from ANBA, which is the Adult Non-Alcoholic Beverage Association. And we're getting a little bit more into the what ANBA does and all of the members who are a part of it. And Marcos just told us that there's over 100 members. And that's pretty wild because I remember, in 2016, there was maybe 2 non-alcoholic spirits that I knew of, right? And maybe a handful of non-alcoholic beers and 1 or 2 non-alcoholic wines. So we're talking a dozen, like to 100. And we see this obviously growing more and more. And I'm going to switch gears a little bit and just talk about a little bit more about these beverages themselves and ask the question to you, are they any good?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a question, and I think that's a question that people have been asking. And part of what we try to do as an association and also support brands is that people assume that they're not great, and the reason they assume is that 5-10 years ago or everything before that, non-alcoholic beer wasn't that great. Non-alcoholic wine was very sweet and kind of grape juicy, and there was virtually no non-alcoholic spirit. So when you're hanging out at a bar social situation and you had a non-alcoholic beverage, people would often say, like, something wrong? Why are you consuming pretty much a really bad beverage? And that's really, really transformed over the past 7 years, both because of innovative entrepreneurs that are producing really high quality products, advances in technology, as well as just opportunities for a greater demand for these type of products. So in terms of non-alcoholic beer, that's one of the kind of drivers of the category. Over 80% of the category is driven by non-alcoholic beer. And they taste equivalent in blind taste tests. You cannot tell the difference between in many non-alcoholic beers and an alcoholic beer. And in fact, the number one non-alcoholic beer in the world, and definitely United States, Athletic Brewing, sells more non-alcoholic beer than all alcoholic beers in Whole Foods. So that is like a way in which a testimonial that people really enjoy these products. On the spirit side, it's been interesting to see, even over the past 3 to 5 years, more the quality of spirits getting better and better and better. Where there would be somewhat of a decent substitute probably 4 or 5 years ago. And now there are great tasting spirits where in some cases you can even drink them neat, and they're quite tasty neat. Previously, you would have to just kind of mix them with use them more as mixers. But now you can create really great tasting non-alcoholic cocktails. And then there's ready to drink cocktails that again are just as good as an alcoholic equivalent in some cases. Wine's starting to get there. When you have like a bubbly wine, it mimics that alcoholic feel of the irritation of your throat, and it tastes great. Non-alcoholic champagne or sparkling whites. The stills are starting to get there because when you go through that dealcoholization process, it can kind of strip, as you probably shared on the podcast, can strip a little bit of the body and the texture and the aromas. But there are kind of innovative brands that are starting to, after the dealcoholization process, really be able to add some body and some texture and some flavor to that. And then you also have wine alternatives that are not tied to the dealcoholization process. And they're these really innovative beverages on their own that are creating unique and different adult beverage profiles. That's just really great to see.
Amazing. Yeah. And I want to touch on a few things you said. One, I feel like you issued a challenge to the listeners. He said these non-alcoholic beers are just as good, and sometimes in blind tasting tests are indistinguishable from beer with alcohol. So go out there and try it and let us know what you think. I want to hear from you. He mentioned some brands, but there's plenty of brands out there. Go to any grocery store at this point and you'll see a whole bevy of non-alcoholic beers. The other thing is that you're talking about non-alcoholic spirits that are good, neat, because this is a real sea change, because most of them you taste it and it's just kind of like meh. It's like not, it's like basically like a tea. Like if it's a bourbon alternative, it tastes like a bourbon tea, and it works well in cocktails, but it's not something that you would just pour over ice. But I did recently try one that I thought was amazing to sip on its own. And I thought, wow, this is the future. We're already getting there, and there's amazing products. So you're right there. And then the last thing I want to touch on is give you an opportunity to rescind the champagne thing, because the champagne board's going to come after you. There's no such thing as not. But really, those sparkling wines, you're right. Oh my God, they're so good. If you're celebrating, like it's a common thing at a wedding, right? That somebody's going to hand you a glass of champagne or sparkling wine. And what do you do if you don't drink? You're just out of luck. And so now that's changed. And I think that's really fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, and I took some non-alcoholic sparkling wine to a graduation reception, and everybody toasted with that just because it was just easier to do. And people were coming up to me and asking me if it actually did have alcohol, because some people didn't want to drink any alcohol. So
yeah,
there are equivalents. And I mean, I got married a couple of years ago, and we had a full alcohol bar and a full non-alcoholic bar, and people were kind of mixing back and forth. And when it came to the champagne or sparkling wine, people couldn't tell the difference. It was really great to see it, and it allowed people to last much longer into the night, into 4:30 a.m.
That's awesome. That's so cool. A lot of people don't think about the fact that like you can party longer when you don't drink as much. That's the key.
Absolutely.
So non-alcoholic beverages helping you to party longer. So you mentioned in the beginning that you have this proclivity for making cocktails, and that you love to look in the refrigerator and check out what people have. So I guess, to wrap it up, I wanted to ask you, what's in your fridge right now? What are you drinking?
Great question. And some of this is from stuff that I individually buy on a regular basis that's accessible or available close to where I live, as well as some samples. But one of the things, so it's interesting you say that, because last week I started along with my wife a event series in upstate New York where I live, and we're calling it Thirsty Thursday. I used to do this event series in Brooklyn and Fort Greene, where we'd get people in the neighborhood together every Thursday, and people would bring a bottle of wine or stuff to drink, and then it was an opportunity to get to know your neighbors. I'm in upstate New York, so we're partnering with a general store, and we're doing this across various neighborhoods in towns, and bringing people together to connect and meet each other. And a couple of things that we served there were Athletic, which everybody loves, the IPA and the Upside Dawn. But what we made as a specialty cocktail, which you ended up writing about, and you called it the Salazar Spritz last November. And it's one of my favorite drinks, which is an aperitivo. It was Wilderton aperitivo. So that bitter orange and kind of like that bitter Italian drink. As a base, and then we throw over toast. And toast is a great sparkling beverage because it's not it's a wine alternative. It's not made from wine, and it has really great notes of cranberry and ginger, and that mixes really, really well with that bitterness, and then a little bit of club soda if you want, and it's an amazing spritz, and people ended up really, really loving that. One of the things, so I'm gluten sensitive. So we have one of our members, Go Brewing, that has at this point the only that I know of gluten-free beer, non-alcoholic beer, and it is absolutely delicious. They have a pale ale, and then they have an amber. But when I give people a taste of that amber, it is like as if it has like 8 to 10% ABV. It's absolutely delicious. So those are some of the things that I have in my fridge at the moment.
That's awesome. And those are some amazing suggestions. The Salazar Spritz, you got to try it. And the recipe is on positivedamage.substack.com, really easy to get. But Marcus, I just want to thank you for joining us today. I love the work that you're doing. I think it's really, really important. I've always admired that. I admire how you approach it too. And so thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me on, and it's been great working with you. I love the idea of you kind of spreading this movement of mindful drinking and an opportunity for people to just have really great tasting options wherever they're at, so they can make much more intentional decisions about the beverages they consume. So thanks so much for having me.
Of course. And for those that are listening, we'd love to hear from you. So please like, comment, subscribe, send us an email. And as always, thank you for joining us. And here's to mindful drinking.